Can everyone hear me? Could you hear him? I hope everyone really not only heard him, I hope they were really listening to what he said. You know, I don't know if we always do the best job of listening in our business. A lot of times I wonder if we're truly listening or are many of us just waiting to speak. There's a big difference between listening and waiting to speak. Some of the notes I was making as I listened to Matt, he talked about change. He mentioned the word change at least 7 times. I kind of lost track after a while. He mentioned change. He mentioned reinventing the business. He mentioned customer-centric. How many folks in here, if you can be honest enough, how many of you are really acquainted with what customer-centric truly means? All right, I got a hand. I got one. I didn't know what customer-centric and customer-centricity meant 2.5 years ago. I was asked to speak to a group very similar to this. And they said, Dan, would you come down and speak on a customer-centric sales organization? I said, I'd be more than happy to. I knew nothing about customer-centric sales organizations. So what did I do? Googled it. Exactly. That's exactly what I did. I Googled it. I spent the next 2.5 hours on customer centricity. I learned, and I'm going to give you the cliff notes on what a customer-centric sales organization is. This is a sales organization that is on massive doses of steroids. It's customer service on massive doses of steroids and a 7-day exercise program. That is what customer-centric means. And that means bringing about change. You are going to have to do your business very, very differently because the consumer, as he said, is now directing how we do our business. Change is imminent. The other thing he says, do they know the value of what you bring? I absolutely know that the consumer does not know the value of what you bring because you don't always explain the value of what you bring. I asked CSRs and account managers. Last year I worked with just short of 1,200 independent agents and staff in their agencies. I asked the staff in each one of the workshops that I ran, I asked them, what is the value proposition of Geico? They all said exactly what Matt said. Give me 15 minutes and save you 15%. So I said, excellent, you know the competition. I asked them, what is your value proposition? I have yet to have one person tell me what an independent agent's value proposition is. Independent agents need a value proposition that they can state somewhere within the first 2 to 4 minutes of meeting a prospect because that prospect already knows the value proposition of all your competition. When we look at where this business is going, I want to read a quote to you from a public speaker. Larry Wilson said, we are faced today with the option of either learning the rules, the roles, and distribution of rewards in this new game or continuing to practice our present skills and become the best at a game that is no longer being played. There's a lot in that statement, and I get to visit 300 to 400 independent agents a year. A lot of these folks are playing an old game that is no longer viable in today's environment. We've got to begin to do some things differently. We've got to begin to affect change. Anybody recognize that? In fact, I heard Matt mention it. That's an old Apple computer. When that Apple came out, Apple was doing real well. Then all of a sudden, Compaq came out with them. Hewlett-Packard came out with computers. IBM came out with computers. All of a sudden, they weren't doing too well. But what they decided to do is they decided to kind of retrench and reinvent themselves. This was their original logo. Changing the logo does not change how you do the business. You've got to change the culture. You've got to all of a sudden reach out to the client base and find out what moves them. All of a sudden, they found out that their array of products has changed greatly over what they first had available. This is a very different company today. Has anyone been to an Apple store recently? How empty was it? Yeah, it was packed, right? Were you on the day they were having a sale? Oh, that's right, they don't have sales. Was it on Wednesday, buy one, get one free day? No, they don't do that either. They don't sell on price. What they do is they create a buying situation. We've got to find a way to stop selling insurance and create a buying situation for the client because today's client is very different than the client that we dealt with in years past. It is all about, when we look at winners, they have 3 things in common: responsiveness, customer centricity, and also learning from other industries. Keep in mind, a lot of people, when I talk to agency owners, they tell me that their competition is the Allstates, the State Farms, the Geico. Your competition today is also Apple, Zappos. Any last interaction that one of your clients had that was a positive to them, that all of a sudden became the bar that you are now subject to. They have raised the bar on every bit of business that we do in our industry. The industry is vastly different and changing as rapidly as even with us sitting here. A year ago, Allstate was the #2 writer of automobile business in this country. Who's #2 today? Geico is #2 today. I'm just wondering in Geico's board meetings that they probably have every Monday morning, I wonder if at that board meeting they said, you know, we're okay with being #2. I don't think we need to go any further. I'm willing to bet they're looking at picking off #1. And if they're looking at picking off #1, I'm sure it'll be through making some changes. We've got to make those same changes in our business. Responsiveness is huge. You heard Matt mention we want to manage travel, not just sell tickets. We don't want to just sell insurance. We want to create a buying situation, and we want to write everything that that client has available. Direct insurance has changed. This game will never be the same. It will not go back to what we've seen in the past. The first thing you've got to understand is you've got to understand what this consumer is looking for. They want counseling and validation. They want to make sure that the coverage they have in place is adequate. They want transparency and value. They're also looking for accessibility and ease, and they want it on their terms. The other thing that they're looking for is they're looking for appreciation. Let me ask you by a show of hands, how many of you are proactively in touch with your client base 4 to 6 times a year outside of bills and renewals? I understand we've got 500 people in here. I find it very disturbing when I can count the number of hands to that question. How often do you think your client hears from Geico, Allstate, or State Farm in any given day? I'm going to guess, and I'm going to go low. I'm going to say 5 times a day, and I'm going to leave out the weekends because I've already done the math for 5 times a day. At 5 times a day, they're probably hearing 25 times a week. That's 100 times a month. That's 1,200 times a year. And when I ask independent agents if they're in touch 4 to 6 times a year, usually the response is no. That is not following customer centricity and being in tune with your client and making sure they're aware of what you bring as a value proposition. When we look at recognizing the changing environment, agencies have so long been reactive. They're very transactional. There is minimal client contact, as witnessed by the hands that we saw in this room today. Also, agencies tend to compensate for a result. There's a big difference in how I'm seeing agencies move and how I suggest to agencies that they should compensate moving forward. They also staffed for servicing. As agencies started to reinvent themselves at the beginning of 2013, they started becoming more proactive. They started becoming transformational. And what transformational means is when you get that call to add a car or delete a car, we're also looking at everything else they have at risk and everything else that our agency can do for that individual, and we're doing it then. That's the difference between being transactional or being transformational. Also, multiple client contacts. I work with an agency out in California. He's in contact with every one of his clients 9 times annually. Every new client that he writes, he is in touch with them 3 times in the first 30 days. He differentiates his value proposition at every opportunity. These things are now necessarily, they're no longer an option for us in our industry. Also, agencies are starting to compensate for a behavior that drives the desired result. That is very different than compensating for a result. I'll give you an example. Many agencies, when I ask owners if they compensate their staff for writing new business, they'll say, yes, they do. It's either a dollar amount or a percentage. And I'll ask them, what if you already have 1 line of coverage and auto in place? Will you compensate if they round out that account? Yes, we will. I said, are you going to give them the same amount? Yep, we'll give them the same amount we gave them before. So I said, so you do not differentiate between a rounded line and a mono line. Let me just ask you folks in this room, would you rather have more monoline business or more rounded business in your agency? Rounded. That's what every agency tells me. They give me anywhere from 4 to 8 different reasons why. Better retention, more chance of referrals, greater contingency, great E&O preventative. So if I ask owners, if it is 7 to 9 reasons better for your agency, why do you compensate the same that you do for a monoline? I don't see the logic of that. One of your peers out in Oregon, it took me about 2.5 hours of cajoling to get him to finally move to, we are now paying 70% on all-rounded business. When I first suggested this to him, he says, Dan, I can't afford to pay 70%. I said, no, what you mean to say is you can't afford not to. I said, what's your aversion to that? He said, well, what if they round 20 pieces of business in a month? I said, oh, how can we stop that? Oh, man, I had not given thought to that. That would about kill us if we have them around in 20 pieces of business. Think about what you want that agency to be. What is your philosophy? What's your value proposition? At the end of the day, I've done the math 1,000 ways to Sunday. There is no downside for compensating infinitely greater for something that's so important to an agency owner. Where do agencies make their real money? It's on renewals. Which business has a better renewal? Monoline or rounded? Which business has a better renewal, EFT or installments? I'm to the point where I don't know why any of us write installment business at all. I know that's a blanket statement, but almost every agency I walk into, sans about five, we can probably do a much better job of writing more EFT business. It's better for the agency, it's better for the client. Customers still want to understand their coverage. They want to feel appreciated. That's why those contacts are so important. And they want a process that is made easy. A lot of times when I talk to CSRs, account managers, they say that they find that today's consumer, they really want three things. Everything, their way, yesterday. And if our agencies are not somehow set up to meet those demands, we are already starting behind the 8 ball. How can you become more customer-centric moving forward? When we look at what obstacles in your agency are keeping those things from happening. When we look at customer-centric, what are the needs of your clients? The only way you're going to find the needs is asking the right questions. Having your staff ask the right questions to your clients. So many of the times when I'm listening to staff in an agency, I'm not sure if I'm listening to a licensed professional at asset protection or am I listening to a state trooper. How many accidents or violations, how many drivers in the household, how many drivers in the household over the age of 16, under the age of 15. They can interrogate better than anybody in the Pentagon. We've got to find a way to begin to have a conversation. Conversations are customer-centric. Interrogations are not. This business is changing. We have ways of assisting you and helping you move your staff towards making these changes. Greatest competition is customers' ignorance. They know very little about the coverage that they have. They know even less about the coverage they should have. Independent agents are best positioned to explain these differences. We don't always take full advantage of those upsides that we have. What ways can a customer interact with you? I'm assuming everyone has a website, or most of us have a website. My next question is usually, is that website mobile compatible? A lot of the agencies that I work with, it is not mobile compatible. Today, what do you think sells more? Desktop computers or handheld devices? Handheld devices. Then why aren't we making sure that we have mobile compatible apps for that? Positioning for the various customer preferences. The consumer has changed. You've got the baby boomers. These are the folks between 46 and 64. I got a lot of boom in myself, actually, as I look at the numbers. These are folks telephone, face-to-face, and email. These are the mediums that they traditionally will work with. When you look at the Gen X folks between 65 and 83, this is email, this is cell phone, this is texting, this is blogging. There are differences between these groups. When we go to the Gen Ys, these are folks that know nothing about telephones. They're all texting, they're online social networks, email, IM, instant messaging. And then we've got the Gen Cs, those folks from 2000 to the present. And I like to think the Gen C, it probably stands for can't believe what these folks are going to be asking of us. Texting, social media, and a question mark. Let me ask you, by a show of hands, how popular is texting? Would you say it's very popular, off the chart? How many of you text? Almost everyone in this room. I know all of you have agency management systems. How many of your agency management systems have texting as part of your software package? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I got 6 people out of a room of 500. We all agree that texting is important, yet only 6 of us have texting as part of our software package. I'll tell you what one of your peers out in Oklahoma did, and this was 2 years ago. He sent out 700 text messages to 700 of his clients prior to a tornado that was expected. The text message was on tornado preparedness, and the expected time it was to hit land in their area. He got 663 responses from 700 text messages. What do you think the tone of the responses was? Thank you. Thanks for thinking of our family. Do you think he differentiated his agency from the competition? Why aren't we taking more advantage of differentiating our agency from the competition? All of these things are available, and somehow we have failed to take advantage of something that is so simple to implement in our agency. I myself, being a boomer, I was one of those, I never wanted to text. I just didn't want to be a part of the revolution. Today, I text from both sides. I don't say this publicly often, but on a rare occasion, I have been known to do one by driving. I try to keep that to a minimum. I'm in recovery now for that. I'm working with a group that's helping me through the process. A lot of agencies tell me that price is king. I'm not a believer of that. We have made price king. We make price king by statements like, let's see if we can save you money, let's see if I can lower your premium, let's see if we can get you a better rate. These are all sentences that need to be taken out of the vernacular of anybody who's in this industry, because that's a game we can't win. The game we can win is the game of selling value. I love what one agency did. They adopted the phrase that price is only a factor in the absence of value. He adopted this phrase in 2007. He told his staff, learn the phrase, live by the phrase, because come September 1st of 2007, anytime it is heard in the agency, save you money, give you a lower price, give you a free quote, $5 fine subtracted from the individual's check. The first 2 months they had pizza parties all funded by staff fines. Because what he wanted them to understand, he was not arbitrarily just taking money away from them, he was trying to change behavior. Change is what is necessary if we're going to win this game. And we can win this game if we begin to implement some of the changes. We have a commodity perception, advertising, getting what you ask for. When you look at the interaction, are you going to be a financial protector or are you going to be a quoter? There's a big difference between being a protector and a quoter. A lot of people have a very jaded view of what we do. Who do we tend to frequently get compared to in other industries? Who do they frequently say? Used car salespeople. Used car salespeople. It was interesting. I read an article one day that said that the cameras that travel on the space shuttle are insured against loss and insured against the images that they take. Makes sense. If you're sending something in outer space, you'd at least like to get the pictures even if you lost the cameras. So how is it that they compare us to a used car salesperson if we're taking care of risks like that? I believe we have done some of this to ourselves. Even used car salespeople have elevated their position. Many of them today are previously owned salespeople. Some of them even are certified. I want to ask, are the certified people, does that mean they take continuing ed? I don't know what certified means, but I know that they've elevated their position. We need to do that same elevation. Experience, your staff's insurance expertise. We need to tap into this. We need to continue and encourage them to get better at what they do. The life cycle of a client, the dynamic products and the coverages. What we have available is untapped. We have not taken full advantage of making these things available. When you look at the available technology, websites, because if you're not online, you don't exist. If it's not mobile compatible, it's a real good chance you're missing out on a lot of your clients. Social media, yellow pages, baseball banners. People still are shying away from social media, but when you look at social media, people tell me, yeah, we were in the yellow pages or we're still in the yellow pages. That's social media. If you had a banner up at a baseball park, what were you doing? You were publicizing to the public. That is social media. Everything is just different in that it's become electronic. It's better, it's easier, and in many times the cost is actually less. The complexity and specialization, travel agents, they began to change their business. What I really find interesting about what Matt said, they are very similar to what has gone on in our industry. There were he mentioned 46 or 44,000 travel agents. 15 years ago, there were 46,000 independent agents. Today, there are 38,550. So you see those numbers on the decrease. When we look at the market share changes, this is an independent agent's game to lose. I believe this is a game we can win if we begin to implement and we begin to kind of reinvent our agencies moving forward. If you've got a policy where anything in comparison to writing everything, this leads to writing nothing. Become an authority on something. Know what your niche is, what clientele you're looking for, and begin to play to that clientele.